Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about the circulatory system. Me, Shubhojit Banerjee, will take you to the insights of the circulatory system in a very brief but elaborate manner. The chief organ of the circulatory system is the heart, which is basically a hollow muscular organ which is chiefly composed of cardiac muscles. If we talk about the location of the heart is located in the mediastinum, which is technically the medial cavity of the thorax in between the two lungs. And in shape and size, it is about the size of a closed human fist. And if we talk about the weight of the heart in general, it weighs about 250 to 350 grams, which is approximately 0.45% of an average human body weight. If we look about the structure of the human heart is basically four-chambered and it is composed of two atria and two ventricles. Now, if we come into this brief and elaborate diagram explaining the structure and anatomy of the human heart as depicted in this diagram has four chambers: the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium and the left ventricle. The right atrium, which deals with the deoxygenated part of the human blood, receives its portion of the deoxygenated blood from two portals. One is the superior vena cava and one is the inferior vena cava. The superior vena cava receives its portion of the deoxygenated blood from the head or arms, and the inferior vena cava receives its deoxygenated portion of the blood from the lower part of the body. After receiving the deoxygenated blood from both the inferior and superior vena cava, the right atrium drains this deoxygenated blood to the right ventricle, and this drainage is controlled by a valve which is called as the tricuspid valve. It is called as such because it has three valve-like apertures resembling a tripartite structure. This right ventricle then sends this blood to the lungs. The lungs, as we know, is the chief organ where oxygenation of the blood occurs. Here the blood becomes rich in oxygen and it is supplied to each and every part of the human body. And then from the lungs, the oxygenated blood returns to the left atrium via the pulmonary vein, and from the left atrium, the oxygenated blood drains to the left ventricle. Again, this portion between the left atrium and the left ventricle is regulated by another valve which is called as the bicuspid valve. It is called as the bicuspid valve because it resembles a bishop's mitre which has a two-way thread around its neck, which is also called as the mitral valve. And from the left ventricle, after it receives the blood, the oxygenated blood from the left atrium, it sends it to the aorta, and from the aorta the blood is distributed to the rest of the body. This is basically the overall working schema of how the circulatory system or how the heart works. So if we look into a flow chart explaining the whole process, we see that deoxygenated blood from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava enters into the right atrium, and via the tricuspid valve it enters into the right ventricle, and via the right ventricle it enters into the pulmonary artery, and this flow is regulated by a valve which is called as the pulmonary valve, and from the pulmonary artery it goes into the lungs where the entire oxygenation of the blood occurs, and from this lungs the oxygenated blood goes on to the left atrium, and from the left atrium via the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve it enters the left ventricle, and from there via the aortic valve it enters into the aorta and it is distributed to the rest of the body. If we now look into the conduction system of the entire heart, then the entire conduction system is compartmentalized into three counterparts. One is arteries, which basically take away blood away from the heart. Second are the veins, which take the blood towards the heart, and then are the capillaries, which link arteries and veins. This entire process of drainage of blood or the rhythmic way by which the heart works are controlled by the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the cardiac muscles. The rhythmic contraction of the cardiac muscles are called as the systole, and the rhythmic relaxation of the cardiac muscles are called as the diastole. If we come into the working principle of how the blood circulation occurs in the human body, it is called as double circulation because the blood flows through the human body twice through the heart in a complete cycle which is known as the cardiac cycle. In this cardiac cycle, we get two counterparts. One is called as the pulmonary circulation and one is called systemic circulation. In pulmonary circulation, we get the heart, from the blood flows from the heart to the lungs and then to the heart again. And then in case of systemic circulation, the blood flows from the heart to the rest of the body and then to the heart again. If we see a brief yet elaborate diagram of how the flow of blood occurs in humans, then deoxygenated blood from the right atrium enters into the right ventricle, and then from the right ventricle the deoxygenated blood enters into the lungs, and from lungs, where the oxygenation process occurs, the oxygenated blood enters the left atrium, and from the left atrium the oxygenated blood enters the left ventricle, and from the left ventricle the oxygenated blood goes to the different body part, only exception being the lungs, and from it the blood again returns after it becomes deoxygenated to the right atrium. This counterpart from right ventricle to the left atrium, this portion is called as the pulmonary circulation, and from the right atrium to this counterpart to the left ventricle, this counterpart is called as the systemic circulation, which comprises the whole portion of double circulation. I hope that this video would be useful and this video would clear all your concepts about the circulatory system. This is Subhajit Banerjee. Thank you very much.